Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we are back again. And now we're going to talk about boxing. And recently it's been announced that on the 11th of April, British heavyweight champion Daniel Dubois will be facing off against Joyce at the O2 London Arena. And this is what many fans would say is like a typical British domestic like dust up between two big heavyweights who are really relatively still new to the game. Dubois was 14-0 and Joyce is 10-0. Now you expect Dubois at age 22 to have those sort of record, but Joyce is recent to the game. I mean, he's 34 now. You'd expect at that age to have a lot more fights under somebody who is 34, but it's a good fight, competitive fight between two big fighters. Not the most fluid in their movement as such. They're very sort of straight, head-on, straight lines as such. I think Dubois is the more stronger, sort of powerful opponent, but Joyce, uses his jab very much and tries to throw a lot of combinations, but doesn't really carry any fire in his combinations. He's not a head mover, he's very much, again, just very straightforward, very rigid in his movement. But I think the key for the interest in this fight is that they're both fighters that are well known or well liked within the boxing community, okay? So that's why people are sort of amped up for this fight. So it's a good competitive fight. Daniel Dubois, I think there is general positivity towards him because he is somebody who has just been able to just get on with it quietly, steadily, pick up his craft, fight constant opponents. I mean, he fought 5 times last year. Okay, so there's been no sort of overhype. There's been no over hyperbolics on his record or what his potential is. He's just been allowed to steadily get on with it, and he has that very modest sort of down to earth sort of personality, and I think that's what boxing fans like. They don't like this kind of flashy, arrogant, overconfident fighter. If they prove that in the ring, okay, and they have these epic fights and they fight everybody, then fair enough, because it is obviously what you do in the ring. But Daniel Dubois is just quiet, very sort of polite, well put together, just sound person, and is allowed to get on with it, okay? So that's why a lot of people like him. Now, comparisons will be compared to Joshua and what they've done and their respective records. But the difference with Joshua is that when he was coming up, he already had the hype around him, you see, and the push behind Matchroom and everything else. So that's why he was getting a lot more of higher sort of superlatives put around him at the time. But Dubois is just steady, gets on with it, and that's why people like him. Now, the only issue I have, okay, is that in no way this should be a pay-per-view fight. It's been announced it's going to be on BT Sport box office, okay? Now, just a quick context, okay, because obviously new to this channel, I hate the idea of pay-per-view, okay? The idea of pay-per-view is purely for the organisation or the promotional companies to make money off their own back, because as we all know, boxing is very much a splintered sport. You've got all these promotional companies all over the place. They're all putting on their own events and it's all coming out of their own pockets. They're funding their own fights, right? So pay-per-view is more of an avenue for them to make profit, right? Because when you put on an event, there's a ceiling to what you can make broadcast rights and the ticket sales and the attendance, right? If you have a fight at 18,000 stadium, right, you can only sell 18,000. That's your maximum capacity, and certain seats will be the top tier at a certain price, and then the lower tier at a certain price. So there's a bracket, there's a ceiling to what you can make in terms of the ticket revenue. But by pay-per-view, you raise that ceiling, right? Because there's no boundary, okay? If you promote your fight well, when you've got two fighters with a set amount of charisma and personality, and if there's a backstory and you can set up the grudge match, and there's a history there. There's no limit to what you can make as a pay-per-view. That's why, you know, it's the concept that everyone wants to still adopt, even though boxing, we've moved more now into the whole streaming app, and the fact that you have the argument of, well, I could pay a lump sum for 1 night of boxing, or I could pay a lump sum for a 4 months worth of boxing. Pay-per-view for now is still prominent, but I've never agreed with it. You know, this whole concept of, well, it's the only way we can get fighters to fight. It's the only way we can get the big unifications, or the big undisputed fights together. It's the only way we can get this fighter to come over, right? The reason for that, and the reason they're saying that, is because boxing, it's not under one sort of unified organisation that sets the rules clearly and has a sort of regimented structure, right? So you look at football, right? Liverpool, top of the league, gonna romp it with the league, yeah? They have to play every single team, right? One week they play Man City, next week they play Arsenal, or next week they play Brighton, and they have to play, right? They have to play each team twice throughout the year. There's no sort of picking and choosing when you fight. There's no sort of cherry picking, okay? Same with tennis. When a player goes into a Grand Slam tournament, he gets drawn 7 opponents, and he's got to face whatever opponents are from the draw. He doesn't get to pick and choose when he fights, how he fights, what weight he fights at, what division he weights at. You know, it's all set within a certain structure and a certain rules, right? Boxing doesn't have that. Okay, it's just this really kind of sort of Wild West mentality when everybody just wants to make as much money as they can, and pay-per-view offers that extra income revenue. But the point is, when you're dictated by pay-per-view, you're more focused on the fights that are more profitable rather than the fights that are most competitive. And what we should be seeing always with boxing is the best fight the best, regardless of what their fan base is and how many followers they got on Instagram and YouTube, etc, 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 right? So the pay-per-view, if you're going to have pay-per-view, it really should be primarily, in my eyes, for a marquee fight, right? An undisputed fight, a fight where you have 2 sort of well-established fighters, okay? They both have their massive respective fan bases, and it's a fight that is going to have a mainstream appeal, I would say, globally, okay? It's a fight that's going to bring non-fans to the sport on a global basis, okay? Now, obviously, the last example we had of that was Mayweather and Pacquiao. Like, literally, the whole world watched that fight, okay? So you've got other examples, like when Tyson was in his prime, Lennox Lewis fought Mike Tyson. You know, that's the sort of marquee level, what I would deem merits a pay-per-view fight. Now, the problem boxing has is, because, as I said, everybody's out to make as much money as can, the standard of what merits a pay-per-view has dropped. Okay, so no longer is it for an undisputed, no longer is it for 2 established fighters, okay? It's all, no longer is it about 50-50 fights, okay? It's all about what is the most popular person on social media, how well are they known on social media, how many followers we've seen. We've seen that, you know, with the recent introduction of the YouTube fighters. You know, I didn't agree with that at all. You know, it's the idea of what a pay-per-view should be, if we are going to have that idea, has dropped so much to the point where it doesn't matter what a fighter's done, right? If they're known on social media, right, then we're going to have to make the fight on pay-per-view, right? Because boxing is in a state of desperation when every promotional company is just trying to make as much money as they can, because the sport is not under one regulative body where the money is collated together and all the events are promoted as one, all the fighters are sold as one, so all the revenue that's come in and then it's sort of spread out evenly amongst all the different stables. It's not like that in boxing. That's the ideal setup you want in any sport, right? Unified as one, you bring all the money together and you share it around evenly so everybody can make, you know, have the opportunity to earn and make a profit on, okay? So we come on to Dubois and Joyce, okay? Now, within the boxing community, Yes, especially the UK boxing community. Yes, we know who Daniel Dubois is. You know, there's this. Well, I wouldn't say hype, but I think the boxing fans see him as potentially the next big heavyweight to come from the UK. He's 22. He's big, strong, 6'5", big, powerful. You know, and he's active right now. And as I said before, there's no over the top commentary on him. He's just been allowed to get on with it. So that's why people are very excited by the prospect of Dubois. Okay, but 14 fights to know, and then the majority of fights he always has the upper hand. So there is going to come a point when they're going to have eventually put him up against a more substantial opponent. That's the excitement of this Joe Joyce fight, right? Because people will look at Joe Joyce and think, well, he could actually cause Dubois some more problems. So this is the kind of test that Dubois needs if we're going to start trying to propel him and put him in a position where he can have a shot at the heavyweight title. That's the allure of this fight, okay? As I mentioned before, other pay-per-views can work if you have a certain charisma, a certain personality, a certain backstory, a grudge match storyline, right? But Dubois and Joyce, they don't have any of that. There's none of that at all. There's no, you know, I saw recently the ITV interview, and you had Dubois and Joyce on there, and it's funny because the promoters and the manager, they did more of the talking. Okay, you saw Dubois, he was very inhibited, very just sort of shy, and sat back, and Joe Joyce was doing a couple of talking, yes, but it was nothing. It was not this intense sort of beef that they normally try to promote in boxing. We all know how it goes, you know. They try to ramp up the grudge, you know, to try and create a storyline to try and entice more people to buy the pay-per-views. But Dubois and Joyce are not those personalities. Okay, there is no grudge match. There is no history. There is no kind of personal grievance between the two. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, they are just literally still relatively new to the game. This is not somebody who's had 10 total defenses consecutively. This is not someone who's had a string of pay-per-views where they've sold $1 million plus on average, okay? These are, like, in terms of the mainstream public, these are relatively unknown fighters, right? So, especially in Dubois' case, and I'm going to say Dubois' case more because I think at 34, Joe Joyce really, if we have to be brutally honest, doesn't have a lot of time left in boxing, you know. But Dubois, you know, if you want him to be the next big thing, the next big hope, okay, what you have to do is to expose him to a larger audience, okay? The standard tactic should be have him on free-to-air fights, yeah, where you can have it in pubs, in bars, you know, people can just watch it in the home, and free-to-air, so you expose him to a much wider audience, okay? And he's big and strong and has that knockout power, so he has that exciting style, that potential exciting style that's going to attract general people to watch him fight, right? So you have him on a free-to-air fights, where if he scores big knockouts and looks good, he can get people more excited, more on the edge of the seat. You then build a fan base, okay, that's loyal to Daniel Dubois, and as the fight progresses, you can get to more know about him, he can do more interviews, and as his profile comes up, he'll then eventually get more confidence and be more freely speaking and create that persona that I talked about that fans can relate to, okay? And then once you generate that fan base, then you can sort of push the button and then put him on a pay-per-view event, okay? Because he'll have the loyal fan base who will be more willing to pay the pay-per-view price for him, okay? Daniel Dubois doesn't have that yet. He doesn't have those elements yet. He doesn't have that sort of appealing personality. He doesn't have that appealing notoriety, okay, because as we know, outrage and controversy sells a lot, as we know, okay, and he doesn't have that loyal fan base, okay, but now they're trying to put him on pay-per-view already against Joe Joyce. This is a good competitive fight, but in no way whatever does it merit pay-per-view. And I'm hearing potentially this could be £20 on a pay-per-view for a British domestic fight against two unknown fighters, not within the mainstream, within the boxing community, the social media bubble, boxing fan base, we all know who these guys are, okay? But outside of that, relatively two unknown names in a pay-per-view fight that you're paying or could be potentially asking people to pay £20 for. Okay? And it's just, to me, it just should never be on pay-per-view. You know, the only scenario you could envisage this, if let's say, they have a first fight, yeah, and it's a real sort of classic sort of toe-to-toe war, and then you have the rematch, and let's say it's controversial, and people really get invested in the result, and they really warm to both fighters. Then the third fight, that's when you can make the pay-per-view, because then you have the history and any potential grudge between the two, and then you have the fan base following because of the previous fights. That's the only scenario I could dream up of where a fight between Daniel Dubois and Joyce could be on pay-per-view. Alright? But it's not going to happen. You know, very unlikely we're going to get a trilogy of fights between the two. Okay, so that's it really. I mean, that's just my thoughts. Again, I mean, we could go on forever about the state of pay-per-view. I just wanted to give my context of pay-per-view. I don't see it as this necessary item that you have to use in order to fighters to fight each other, okay? If you want to get fighters to fight each other, you have what I said before. You have a unified setup within boxing that makes these fighters fight each other, that you can't just pick and choose who you fight, when you fight, how you want to fight them. You have a set organisation that's not committed to any sort of promotional company or commissions or broadcaster, okay? You have like a UEFA for football, or an ATP for tennis, or F1 for Formula 1, okay? They have clear parameters, set rules. You are the champion and you will fight this guy on this day. Now, you will say to me, well, Peter, they have commissions and don't you have mandatories and all this? Look, come on, we all know that the amount of times just within boxing, these things are bent, rules are bent, mandatories are sidestepped, and, you know, someone will have 4 belts and they'll drop 1 belt here, but then they'll step up in this weight division and pick up this belt, and then they'll drop this belt here, make this vacant belt here. You know, we had this all with Mayweather, Canelo. I mean, we could spend 10, 20 videos going on it. I'm not going to do that right now. I was going to stick to the current subject of Daniel Dubois and Joyce. Good domestic fight? Yes. Is it a competitive fight? Yes. You could argue, is it a 50-50? I would lean more to Dubois, but it's a closer fight than what we've seen really from them in their respective records so far. Is it a good fight for Dubois to use as a stepping stone to help propel his profile as he moves up? Of course it is. Nothing wrong with the fight. It just shouldn't be pay-per-view. Never ever pay-per-view. But as I said before, I don't believe in pay-per-view. The only pay-per-view fight I think there is currently in boxing is Joshua and Wilder. And even that's tainted because of what happened with Joshua and Ruiz in the first fight, right? And even more so in the second fight, because the nature of the way that Joshua won, okay? If he destroyed Ruiz, you could have dismissed the first fight. Oh, the nerves got to him and, you know, it was just a one-off. But the nature of how it was much more of a strategical, tactical route to beat Ruiz has got me leaning more to the fact that I think Wilder would end up just knocking Joshua out. You know, I had it initially as a 50-50 fight, but I would lean more towards Wilder, because after seeing what Ruiz did to Joshua in the first fight, I mean, Wilder, we all know his knockout power, and if he can knock down Tyson Fury twice, you best believe he can get to Joshua, and he only needs to get to Joshua once. Okay, so that fight is still tainted, but I think at the moment it's a pay-per-view because of Undisputed. But if Joshua drops the WBO belt and eventually Usyk gets it again, that's going to taint that pay-per-view potential fight even more so. I mean, the only other one would be Fury and Joshua. But again, you would need Fury to beat Wilder, have the WBC, and then Joshua retain the other 3 he has, which is the IBF, WBO and the WBA. And then you can have those 2 together in a mega fight at Wembley Stadium, 80,000, and that would smash the record. I think the current UK pay-per-view record is 1.5 million, 1.53 million for the Joshua and Ruiz rematch. Well, Joshua Tyson Fury fight for undisputed heavyweight champion of the world would just smash all records. That would be the only other pay-per-view that I would pay for. Okay, you've got two established champions, fan bases. Everybody knows them. They've had previous pay-per-view fights. You've got distinctive personalities in Fury, controversial, notorious. Joshua, he's got the massive fan base. The successful pay-per-views. It's got everything. It's got everything you need as a setup for a pay-per-view. Daniel Dubois and Joyce has none of that setup for a pay-per-view, and it just doesn't warrant it, especially at £20, and that's what we're getting to. I mean, oh boy, £20, I don't know, but that's my quick thoughts on it. So I will provide more boxing coverage as I come along. I just think, I could do tons more videos, but I just have to look at this on a certain fight, and pay-per-view for a domestic fight against two largely inexperienced fighters who are very sort of shy personalities, and outside of boxing there's not a lot of hype or knowledge about these two, and you're saying to me you're going to put that on pay-per-view, and it's just more desperation because from BT Sports point of view, obviously and Frank Warren, Billy Joe left Frank Warren to go to Matchroom, and I believe that this Tyson Fury fight with Wilder is the last one of his contract with sort of BT and ESPN, because he fought Tom Schwartz, okay, then he fought Otto Wallin, and then he fought Deontay. He's going to fight Deontay Wilder now for the the rematch, and I believe they've classed him as a mandatory, so there's no sort of rematch scenario or obligation that he's got to meet if Fury wins. So after that, Fury's kind of free to do what he wants to again. So what have they got after that in terms of BT Sport, and what has Frank Warren got in terms of potential superstar? This is why I believe we're seeing the pay-per-view button being pushed now, because they're looking at it and thinking, well, if Fury loses to Wilder, really, where can you go in Fury? And I believe Fury's 30 now. I don't think, even if he beat Wilder, I don't think Fury's going to last in the game much longer. If he were to beat Wilder, I would probably see him try a big fight against Joshua, and then see you later, Tyson Fury. So they need now to push Dubois probably faster than what they want to in terms of trying to make him a pay-per-view star, right? This is why I think this fight is getting put on pay-per-view. But £20, I mean, I'm not justifying it, but the only way you can justify it, whether it's £10 or £20, is if you have this monstrous undercard, okay? That's, truly every fight is a world title, and every fight is a 50-50, and fights that are really sort of can get the hardcore fan base really excited about. But I can't see it. I just can't see it. So we'll see how it goes on. Like I said, I'm leaning towards the bar. It could be a really good fight, could be, really great fight, but it just shouldn't be pay-per-view. Never ever should it be pay-per-view. I don't think any fight should be pay-per-view now, but that's a whole nother debate. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you a fan of Dubois? Do you think he can become this next superstar? What do you think the numbers will be for the pay-per-view? I mean, £20, do you think they can... I mean, let's face it, 1 million or even 500,000 is way out of the question. Even if it's on Sky, they won't be able to expect those numbers. But 50,000, 100,000, is that a realistic target they should be looking at for this fight? Do you think it will do more? Do you think it will do absolute terrible and flop and, make Frank Warren look really bad? What other pay-per-view fights are there from a British perspective that you think should be on pay-per-view more than this one, if you are in favour of pay-per-view? So just let me know, and there'll be more boxing coverage. Like I said, I do everything from movies to sports to animation, but I love my boxing. I'll cover the boxing, so you'll get more boxing views and videos coming from me shortly. But this is it for now. Dubois and Joyce, good competitive British fight, good for the hardcore fan base, just never should be pay-per-view. Whether it's £20, £5, £2, no pay-per-view, this should be free to air. Get Dubois that exposure amongst the fan base, build his fan base up, get him some momentum going in his profile. He can develop his more personality amongst the fans, few more free to air fights, and then put him more on pay-per-view. But that's my thoughts for now. You take care of yourselves. More videos coming soon. And yes, take care for now.